right, going live in 3, 2, 1.
Hello everyone, happy Friday and welcome back to People Matters Day 2 session. Today's session is Talent Mobility, is virtual talent mobility strategy, the solution to the Great Resignation. And my name is Do-Young Ha. I'm a global talent advisor at RDI Worldwide, and I am happy to introduce Sophie Henkelmann, who is head of people and communication at Locad. Locad is e-commerce logistics in APEC, and Gordon Dudley, our CEO of RDI Worldwide, attracting best talent for global companies in Korea. So welcome, Sophie and Gordon.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Do-Young. Thank you, Gordon.
So today's topic is global mobility, and to give you some background information about this topic, so many people has resigned since the COVID outbreak. So they has resigned their job with their own free will, which could be because of their looking for work-life balance or looking for some other reasons. And this pandemic has led this workforce to work fully virtually, like we saw Zigbang, Metaverse, Metapolis yesterday. So people are fully working virtually. And so we are living in this new normal, and this provides us new options on the table. And with the globalization and digitization, so people can work in other countries, and there's mobility on domestic side. So I would like to give you a question to Sophie. So working as a head of people and communication at Locad, so I presume that you are working on moving people and moving goods. So what's your perspectives on this project, this topic?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. Maybe just a little bit of background about Locad to put this into context with our session today. We started Locad just a year and a half ago with 3 founders plus 5 people, and we are now almost 70. And I can say that out of the 70, I probably know personally and physically only 10. So that gives you an example of hyper growth combined with, as you said, Do-Young, the new normal. It's been quite an experience. We'll talk about the limits, obviously, the challenges, as well as the fantastic opportunities that nobody could foresee before COVID arrived. At the moment, what's very interesting is the parallel between moving goods and moving people. And that's particularly true for Locad. Yesterday, I was reading again my notes on the fantastic sessions that we had, and came to mind, I think there are three keys at the moment when you talk about mobility, flexibility, both on the employee side and the employer side. The first one is obviously the sense of purpose. And that's something you just mentioned. I think a lot of people reflected on, what am I doing here? Is this the job that I want? Is this the work-life balance that I want? And this has triggered the Great Resignation for a lot of people, suddenly re-examining the role, the function, the culture of the company, the geography that we're in. I mean, we know in some parts of the world, including Seoul, rent can be really, really dramatic on your paycheck. And so suddenly with all these new modes of working, you are thinking, what is my purpose? Is this where I want to be? And when David was presenting the virtual world, it was very interesting because those new tools are not answering that question. You do have, as a human being, as an employee, you have to first reflect on, what is my purpose in that company, is that role, and then eventually move on with new tools such as the Metapolis that was presented. The second key that I thought about yesterday after all those sessions was the sense of belonging. And this is something that we all face because we're used to walk into an office, saying hello to people face to face. You have affinities, you have people you struggle more with. And the sense of belonging has shifted as well. Even if you have a sense of purpose and you join the company and you're very happy, at one point you really wonder, do I belong? And if I do, how does that manifest? So using Metapolis could be one way, right? Being very, very comfortable online. Some other people are not, and so they miss tremendously the direct human contact. The other part was the diversity, and the two examples we had yesterday were really interesting, linked to the purpose. One was the example of Lucinda, I believe, when she mentioned that she had to recreate a sense of belonging because she was the only non-Korean executive. And so you need a new angle, right? You're happy with your purpose. This is where you want to be. But then the belonging is something that you have to work on. The other example for ASEANs was also very striking. That was the opposite. Somebody who decided to leave a home country behind, jump from a legacy corporation, maybe very well known in Korea, and start her own project. So again, here you see the purpose was found, and then the sense of belonging had to be created, partnering with the French team, for instance. The last thing that I saw really interesting yesterday when we think about mobility and resignation was the engagement and the employer brand. Very often people tend to confuse satisfaction and engagement. If you take a pulse in the company, you might get a really high satisfaction rate. And so as a people person, you're like, oh, we're doing great, you know, people are happy. But then if you look at engagement, then you might have a low number. So it's, to give an example, it would be like you're invited for lunch, you're really enjoying lunch, but you didn't take part in the conversation. So you are satisfied with the meal, but it doesn't mean that you will become an advocate for the company or that you will go beyond the simple task and engage with the culture. So I think in general, those 3 points are really interesting when we hear about people willing to change, willing to be mobile, discovering what it takes to be working from home fully or wanting one day back in the office, all of this.
Thank you, Sophie. So I want to ask a question both of you. So many people has resigned, which means that there are many talents in talent pool. So we can attract those people focusing on global mobility. Do you think this is like worth it, like as a key selling point of company or a job?
Maybe Gordon, you can provide some insight for the Korean market first.
Sure, and it's a great question, and it's something that we tried to address in our last monthly webinar. This strange dichotomy where, yes, there's been a great resignation. Lots of people are entering the talent pool, but at the same time, companies, which we're hearing a lot, who are speaking with us and requesting to us, really struggling to find the right talents and being able to attract them. So, it seems a bit illogical that there could be at one time a surplus of talent, but yet an inability to hire them. And I think that is exactly what the Great Resignation is all about. I do think that what has perhaps kind of shifted very much through the discussions that we were having yesterday is just how, in a sense, that mobility and flexibility, if we kind of use that kind of terminology, is almost a prerequisite now. And I think that is what was. There was a general trend or shift towards that within work and within the workplace. But what has happened is it's been accelerated, so much so in a short space of time, essentially mandated from companies due to lockdowns and whatnot. And so now, as Sophie explained, people have now got accustomed to that. Now, it's almost, if you don't have it as an option, then you're going to struggle to attract the right kind of talents. it's not about having full full virtual environment or full office environment. It's about choice. It's about people being able to design their working life in the optimal way for themselves. And so I think, again, to go back to the example yesterday of Zigbang, David Kim talking about being a total distributed workforce, but yet still having offline co-located working spaces available to people should they need them. And so I think that's really the best that a company can do right now, is to give the choice to the employee, because certain jobs, certain work do continue to need to be done in a co-located space. Others do not. And so I think if people have the choice, then they will ultimately be more satisfied because they're getting what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this in our team. It was mentioned yesterday too, right? Like young graduates and junior people are putting on the table more than what's my paycheck. Now the negotiation is really about the compensation package in general. So, where can I work? Is it about the output, or do I have to clock in and out? We also have to deal with the gap and the discrepancy between, at Locad, we need team in warehouses. So they're not working from home. Typically, they have to be there. Then the tech team, on the other hand, can pretty much stay home all the time because they really don't need to be on the ground. So it's introducing a lot of flexibility. It's also introducing some elements of fairness, because when you build your culture, you want to make sure that you provide the same benefits. Now, those benefits can look a little bit different depending on what your job is. I give you another example. We have team members from Sydney to London. Now, yes, I do like to work at night, but I'm not going to cover all those time zones. So this is where, introducing tech tools become really, really handy. And then you introduce some policies and some new way of working. One could be simply, everybody needs to update their status. Is it nighttime? Are you available? Are you not available? So that's, those are new things. I think before it was you're on or you're off. Now the flexibility can also be very invasive for some people. And we talked yesterday about, the women in the workforce, and it's very interesting to see how historically it was harder for women to say, I need to step out because I have a life outside. Now slowly you also see a lot of men saying, hey, I'm done with my day. So I like this. I think it's also bringing some balance in a lot of areas for the greater good. So that's really what we see at Locad. Now, what's also interesting when you have a global team is expectations are very, very different in every country. And so in the Philippines, traffic, I remember yesterday somebody was mentioning traffic jam in Gangnam. Trust me, it's nothing compared to Manila, especially on a rainy day. So, for those people, obviously, the distance and not having to commute will be on the table when they negotiate. For other people, it might be just staying home, like they don't want to be exposed to the outside world for medical reason, for personal reason. For some other people, they feel completely cut off. And the question we get over and over in the monthly survey is, when do we get an office? So it's very interesting to see both at hiring stage as well as afterwards when you start asking in recurring polls or in survey about the future of work in your company, how everybody views what's coming next. So it's a fine line to walk, but it's also an amazing opportunity to shape it the way you want for your company.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, some of the classic kind of rather satirical cartoons on coming out of America in a work from home status, where the senior executive is working from home in their second house in their private office, with all the technology they need. whereas other employees, maybe in a multiple person household, young children, not a great internet connection. I mean, these are the kind of the real challenges that such a massive change to the working environment has really kind of uncovered and one of the challenges that companies need to overcome. You also mentioned benefits there, Sophie. Companies trying to offer more cash benefits for the setting up of the home office, right? If you're expecting your team to be working from home, how can you make them as productive as possible? Give them the chance to create a good, harmonious, productive, comfortable working space to do that. And if in some countries fast internet is not a given, then that should be part of that, perhaps, for sure.
Yeah, you also see it's very different. Before, you don't bring your family, or you don't bring your personal environment when you walk into an office. Now it's the opposite. We actually have a view into people's houses, and it can create a lot of discomfort because of what you mentioned, right? The different level of education, your different environment. So there's a whole, I would say, it's really people matters. This is where we do it best, with a lot of empathy, with a lot of education, with a lot of respect. It's okay if you hear a dog, if you hear a rooster, the next person might have a younger baby, the next person might be sharing the space with a spouse, and being online as well. So all these problematics were not there before. So I think it's a lot of adjustment, both on the people side and on the employee side. And this is where, in terms of employer brand, and that's something that came up yesterday, you do have a huge card to play, because am I going to feel comfortable having my camera all the time? Is this going to be a requirement, or this is a nice to have? Something that is very striking for me here in Korea, some places I go, I see that employees are going for lunch together. So if you're online, that's also like, what do? Do you block the calendar and everybody has a chance to have 45 minutes when they want during the day? Is this possible if you are spread out through different time zones? So all these, I would say, preferences have to then be looked at and see if that's manageable. So on one hand, you have everybody coming with new preferences, and on the other hand, you still need to run a company. You still need to be there for your customers. You still need to address specificities. I can give you another example. The nightmare for me are the bank holidays around the world. It's really complex. If you have, for instance, we have a large tech team in India, and because they can work from anywhere, they could, have a contract with a residence in Bangalore and then ask to move because there is a very important religious holiday in the south or in the north. And then the question is, okay, how, which bank holiday do I assign to this specific person? So that's all these questions you didn't have before. You would go to the office, or you would be linked to an entity, and that's it, right? So it's intriguing. It's very interesting to see people coming with a lot of queries that were never on the map before, reshaping that flexibility, reshaping the way we work together, understanding what matters to some and what doesn't matter to others, and finding the balance. I would like, if it's okay, to answer, Doyon, the global hiring, and then you'll jump into this, Gordon, as well, because that's your expertise. So at Locad, we have two legal entities at the moment, one in Singapore and one in the Philippines. So if you are based in one of these countries, then you could be a full-time employee, pretty straightforward contract, with the benefit and labor law applicable to you, and tax law applicable to you. Now, if you are outside, yesterday I mentioned in one of the sessions, I think I wrote it, you can go through a global payroll partner, and that person or that entity will help you hire, and that won't be a direct hiring, but that person will then be allocated to Locad, for instance. So here you need to really see two different things: the status of the person, and that's more on the hiring side, the discussion happened, and then the employee journey. And what's happening for Locad is no matter your status, your employee journey will be the same. So you will be fully incorporated in the company. And that's really, really key, because it goes back to the sense of belonging. It goes back to the sense of comfort, of knowing, you're part of the company, nothing will happen to you tomorrow. So these are two different things that we can do. On the tax part, if you're a consultant, for instance, it's very often that you will be requested to prove that you are paying taxes and filing taxes where you should. So the company is not necessarily responsible for that, but you do want to make sure that people are compliant. So this is another new thing that we're dealing with, is all these different statuses and different locations. It's as you said, Gordon, it's opening a wider pool of talents. It's also introducing a higher complexity on the day-to-day if you're managing the operational side of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from being in Korea, working with a lot of global companies, a lot of the kind of mobility that they are interested in creating is the ability of their local teams to be able to take up positions in other countries, in other roles. And what we have heard over a number of years is that actually that capability is not really present in abundance in Korea. So Koreans working in global companies who probably, if you ask them, why do you enjoy to work, or why do you choose to work for a global company? The answer is for global opportunities, for future jobs that I might take up in different countries to work in a global business environment. But then what happens for companies when they actually are in that process of having an opening in a country, and as a first stage trying to hire internally, they maybe as an APAC region or as a global organization, do not find sufficiently well-qualified talents from their career organization. And I think that is something that it's a frustration for global organizations, but it's also something perhaps that we can look at as to why that is the case. When, if you ask people, the desire in careers is so strong to take up these kind of positions. And through conversations that I've been having, a lot of it is around their ability to work with colleagues from other countries. So on paper, their English might be good enough. They operate with email, on other communication tools with no problem. But when it comes to actually, if you like, competing against other candidates from other countries, who are equally qualified in terms of job experience and tenure with the company, then they tend to be rather lowly evaluated. And so it would seem that a lot of the local talents do not really possess that well-rounded package of skills to be able to be mobile in the global sense. And so I think that's something that continues to be a frustration for global companies who have very successful career organizations and want to enhance that employee journey for their local employees in Korea. But the global company's choice simply ends up with not selecting him. And I think that's something that definitely we at RDI are also trying to help through some of the programs that we offer. and it's something that, given the current circumstances, with more and more technology facilitating that global interaction, is something that could be more open, as in these opportunities are increasing. So I think in that case, that with more opportunities available, definitely there should be a push to try to prepare, upskill, and hone that experiences to be able to take up those positions.
Yeah, it's fascinating because if I think about your background, if I think about Dorian's background, and my background, it's really an example. It's when you think mobility, very often people who have not yet left their country, they're thinking, I need to pack, and where's my passport? And it's true, you do need to do these two things. However, the first step is really approaching mobility with an extremely humble heart and mind. Because crossing a border, whether it's within the company or because you're joining a new company, it's really a change. And the interesting thing about the word change is it's neutral. So if you have a group of people and you announce in your team, I'm going to talk to you about a change, you can see the different faces, right? For some people, change is, wow, what's coming? Great, I'm on board, even before they know. For other people, it's the opposite. It could be a reaction of like, I like my comfort. And I fully agree with you, Gordon. I think we need to do a better job internally for newcomers, as well as getting the support of RDI, preparing people. And that's very true as well for the re-entry shock. I give you an example. You have people who have been abroad forever, like myself. And I don't know, maybe one day I'll go back to my home country and it will be a reverse shock. The other thing, and I would rely on your expertise here too, is to give you a real life example. There is, for expatriates, for instance, when you rotate every 2-3 years, very often you get a question of, so do you speak the language? And as much as you want to integrate, as much as you want to learn, the truth is what you're bringing to the company is not necessarily language skill, especially for me, trying to learn Arabic for 2-3 years. And then now I'm in Korea. And then before that, I was, in other continents and other countries. And so it's very important, I think, to set the right expectations and say, you're not going to get the perfect candidate. Let me work with you and tell you why this person or that person, internally or outside, would be a good fit. And yesterday we heard this as well, the idea of transferable skills. And I think that's very central when you think mobility and when you think resignation. I'm walking away from something that I knew, maybe I was very good at even, and what can I take with me to my next job or to my next position in the company? So this flexible mind, humble heart, transferable skills, and definitely getting the support of experts like the RDI team, because it's not light. And we haven't even touched on what if you move and there are other people involved, right? What if you have a partner, spouse, children? The time of COVID right now, traveling is extremely difficult. So if it's a Friday night and the blues is settling in, you can't just jump on the plane and go back for a long weekend. So I think the mobility is really expanding the pool, and it's also forcing us to think again, how do we prepare our team members and the workforce for those changes?
Yes, and trying to change a little bit of technology side. So technology is removing the borders and barriers to be more integrated in the distributed workforce. Do you think that it promotes or inhibit global mobility? And have you ever found any challenges so far?
You want to take that one, Gordon?
One thing that just immediately came to mind is that it's very interesting to see that the pandemic has had two kind of totally opposing trends going on. One, the digitalization of companies has been massively accelerated. So, I spoke with some people back in Q2 2020. They are saying we are so lucky that last year we decided to move everybody off of desktops onto laptops, and with this work from home mandate, we've just sent everybody home, and we're doing business as usual. On the other hand, there were some other cases who were like, goodness, we now need to implement the most rapid technology investment and implementation that we've ever done in our company. And of course, for some legacy companies, that's just been an absolute nightmare. So there's been that element of kind of advanced technology, which has, in a sense, kind of helped to broaden and facilitate more mobility. But at the same time, in coming back to more of a kind of the physical sense of mobility in a global sense, is that, of course, travel has been incredibly difficult. And so what, companies wanting to send somebody on a business trip to co-locate for a project, maybe to participate in a conference or something like this, which, maybe down to Singapore for us from Seoul would be something we would do quite typically, has been stopped. And so we have a kind of massive barriers to mobility, but at the same time, an increased facilitation of it. So it's very interesting to see that. That was just the thing that immediately came to my mind on this point.
Yeah, I have to add one thing as well, is when we look at the budget to move people around, it's true that now, because there's a serious acceleration on the tech side, you think twice because there's so much that we can do from the distance, and it's now proven, right? We did it like 2 years before, maybe we were not sure, but now we clearly have the data, including DocuSign, including a lot of compliance and legal, like all of this has been digitized for the better. The other thing is, I would give an advice, and I don't think the mobility start with knocking on the door of the people team and saying, I'm interested, I want to be next when there's position open abroad. I think it starts way before. Look for places and areas where you can broaden, your horizon within your company. It doesn't start the day you get the position and again, you're ready to pack and you have your visa stamped in your passport. There are a lot of ways in different companies to get involved and to be exposed to the outside world and get you even more ready to join what Gordon was saying earlier. It will lower the shock, especially the cultural shock and the way you work with people who might not have the same mindset as you do. It's not always on the cultural side. It could be, and I give you an example. I'm the perfect example because I'm coming from the law firm world, and then I switched to business and tech. And I can tell you, there is comfort in working with people who think the way you do, whether it's the medical field or the legal field or engineering. The crossing over is when you really start broadening your horizon. And this can happen without traveling per se. And I think that's very important. When you have the chance to be in a company where you, on a daily basis, you can already interact with different people. You can use your language skills. You can see what's on the other side and why people are working differently. I would really, really encourage those who are looking into a mobility journey within their company or outside to start already. I think you're bringing even more weight the day you have to have the discussion with your manager or you put your name in the hat.
Can I kind of just extend that thought there? How can we go about doing that? Is that something that you've been trying to facilitate at Locad proactively?
Yes, we have. Because again, if you think about the engineers, most of them are based in India. So you have the layer of being Indian, you have the layer of being an engineer, you have the layer of being a tech. And suddenly, they need to lead a project with a sales team in the Philippines. And you see magic happening, but you also see some disaster coming. And it's not from a lack of being amazing people, because I'm in the position where I know each of them separately. So I know they're all talented. They all want to advance the mission, vision, and value, and get their OKRs checked at the end of the month or the quarter. But the truth is, it's so easy as a human to default back to the culture, to the reaction you're comfortable with, to get, another colleague sitting next to you in a virtual conference to be like, so you agree, right? And that's really something that should come within to prepare. So we're doing this, and the idea of cross-cultural teams, the idea of squads. So we try to pair people on specific projects, so they start working together. So if we need to move them around, this is again not a shock to the system. It will be new, but it won't be a total shock. Like, I've never done that before. How come everybody is against my idea? And you have this whole layer of the high context versus low context cultural environment as well. So it's, the more we can do before, the better we can prepare our team members. I think the smoother the journey for them, because nobody in the people world like to see others fail. I don't, and I believe, Gordon, you feel the same for your clients and for your team. So it's really on us to identify what we can do before, put that on the map, and support them along the way. And it's also very fair, because being fully transparent will allow them to back out, right? I've had cases of people saying, I'm not too sure, and I'm like, that's okay. It's better to know now than after the big leap. So it's, the transparency is really important there.
Yeah, for me, I think there's definitely an element of an innate curiosity. If people have that kind of thirst for knowledge about other countries, cultures, aspects of the business, they in a sense will pursue it themselves. And I think that if you have a very dispersed, globally dispersed team, then people who maybe don't have that naturally should and could be given an opportunity to just in almost a more passive way be exposed to how it is to work in the Mumbai office. What is a day in the life of, I'm in a sales team, but what's the New York sales team? How do they operate? And I think even just a kind of a forum for sharing can be a good starting point to help kind of unite and foster those relationships through a globally dispersed team.
Yeah, and we started very basic. We started with the stomach, right? Every single human being has something to say about the food they like. So monthly, we have an event called Happy Hat. So Happy Hat Locad. We started with very basic. We started with music. We started with food. We started with, the day you can leave your house. Where do you want to go? What's your preferred type of activity, sports? So things that are really universal and very easy to discuss and engage with. And then you go one level higher, and then it becomes more personal, more technical. And again, it's, I always say it's a company. It's not, I know we hear this in Silicon Valley, especially, we're a family. We're not, we're people looking in the same direction, trying to achieve something that we think is valuable, no matter the company you're with. But at the end of the day, it's okay. You don't like that person, just make it work for your OKRs. Be gentle, be respectful, but you don't need to force yourself if that doesn't work. So it's, with the mobility, it's the same. You might have this vision of France, it's all about macaroon, and then you get there, you're like, oh my God, too many French people. So it's expectations, right? Managing expectations, really keeping a humble mind, and preparing those who are willing and able to take the jump.
Thank you, Sophie. Before we move on to the Q&A session, I would like to touch upon diversity and inclusion. So we talked about women in leadership yesterday, and there's new personal situations going on in mobility in South Korea. So there's a huge rise of singles in South Korea. How is that changing the Korean demographic?
So I don't know the Korean market per se, but I do have some equivalents, and I give you an example. We mentioned that earlier in the session. When you talk about mobility, quite often it will impact others around you. So the company is just looking at the employee, but the reality is there are people behind the employee. It could be a spouse, it could be children, it could be whatever your personal situation is. And the trend we see in Korea, and I'm not going to comment, that's not my place to comment on the cultural, social aspect. However, what I see is with women taking more and more space, and rightly so, with their talents and skills and expectation, this is good. It's opening again the talent pool, and it will probably bring some balance, because suddenly it might be the woman saying, hey, I have this opportunity, what are we going to do? So I see this as a very, very positive thing happening. Now, those cases, every case is very different. So for some people, it will be, wow, let's do it. For some other people, it might have a more dramatic effect, whether the person decides to go or to stay. But overall, I think that the diversity will be there if we have more women crossing. Data also shows that on the people skill, on the empathy, on the adaptability, women are scoring really high. So that's good for a company, probably because, in our personal lives, we have to deal with a lot of changes. So that's very good. At the end, again, it's preparation. And if it's something they want, we should definitely be there to support specific needs.
Absolutely. I think it's a very important topic to talk about, in the context of Korea. And I guess it's taking us into the area of social mobility, but also within a company perspective, vertical mobility. And I think, it's only been in relatively recent times where the career path within the Korean business environment was very rigid and fixed. Number of years to be promoted, essentially a kind of a mapped out career path if you stay with the same company, which most people did with much longer tenures. And I think that has just so rapidly shifted into a much more flexible and mobile type of environment. Then that's now been compounded with the what's happening in Korea, with essentially one of the world's lowest birth rates, with marriage happening later consistently as well, where we see now that actually there is, if you like, as Sophie mentioned, the talent pool demographics have changed, and I think that definitely has a lot of opportunity, because the more flexible that a workforce is in the macro sense, the more globally competitive it can be. And so, it kind of going back to one of my earlier points about a lack of skills or a competency to be able to go overseas, maybe this is something that will rapidly accelerate that, whereas there was previously maybe social stigma around a single woman going overseas for a job overseas, that can be eroding, and I think that's just absolutely a great thing for for society, for the individual, to be able to enrich that experience by people being able to have that social mobility. I think also if we talk about within a company in terms of evolution into more of a meritocratic type of system, that's happening. I mean, it has been present in global companies, but it's also happening in a major way across the large Korean companies as well, who are dismantling the promotion by tenure, where they are giving much more transparent performance evaluation systems, and also performance evaluation systems based around much more holistic type of criteria, which I think is also great to see. So I think all of these kind of trends and shifts are definitely making Korea more globally competitive, and I think should definitely help. Of course, from the society perspective, you know, the bad news stories come out about the low birth rate and what that means for the future. That's a different topic, perhaps for another day, that we can talk about.
Yes, so before we move on to the Q&A session, if you are first time to join this People Matter session, then on the bottom right side, there's Q&A box. So you can raise your question anonymously or with your name. We are going to move in Q&A session within 5 minutes. So to wrap up this global mobility session, I would like to give you HR questions in general. So what can HR to encourage or support employees in their mobility desires? And maybe you could give us some examples of successful cases of companies with the global mobilities, like what they have done, how they like successfully implemented.
Sure. I mean, there's an extreme case. You have Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, who's decided to leave only on Airbnb. So talk about mobility and flexibility. That's really an extreme case. That said, when I joined Airbnb, one of the things that everybody had to do as a new hire is try the product. So you had to become a host or a guest. And I think there is a very interesting parallel for the companies today is if you want people to be mobile, you have to put this top of mind. You have to tell them it exists. You have to have a program in place to be very transparent about how will you be picked as the person who goes. Now I feel like I'm talking about a space shuttle with only a few seats, but it's very true. The first thing is make it visible. If that's something that's available in your company, make it visible. Talk about it. Showcase people who have done it, whether they were the one coming from headquarters to a local office or the reverse. You know, when you talk about benefits, if language is going to be an issue, start early. You know, have that on the table as well. And say, you're interested, let's get you ready. In 2 years, you might be at a level where we feel comfortable on top of your other skills to send you abroad, for instance. That's something that is on the people team to do. Really the transparency, having the policy in place, making sure it's part of the annual conversation or, every 6 months, whatever your performance cycle is. And because if it's visible, people will talk about it and will want to do it. If it's really something hush-hush, only for a few, not really sure how you get there, not really sure how you qualified, it's not good. It's not democratic and it's not sending a good message. So really, Do Young, I think the transparency, being consistent, being coherent, being fair, which means going back to gender diversity, don't put criteria that will automatically disqualify someone with a family, even if the finance tag might be higher still at the beginning for the screening. I think it has to be open for everyone, and then it's a larger conversation. But yes, absolutely. If you have one, if you want one, make it a priority, make it intentional, make it part of the employee journey.
I would echo that. I think that's a great point, and I think to suggest success cases, definitely companies that I've been exposed to in the past who have clearly defined programs for different types of opportunities with well communicated criteria for being able to get onto those, and kind of working that back to, you know, if this is something for a mid-level manager, you're currently a junior manager, what do you got to do to get there? If this is a program for the senior executives, but you're currently a mid-level, what is it that you need to do as a mid-level to get to that? I think that is definitely one of the key facilitators. And I think if it's part of the company's mission, you have to also really celebrate those stories, right? You know, make these people who have put themselves forward to pursue these kind of opportunities, the champions. You know, if this is really what is believed to be part of the mission, the company's mission, then the people who have been able to accomplish that that type of mobility, which is perceived to be integral to the success, then celebrate them internally, promote them and their story internally and externally as much as possible, in order that it can be that accessibility can be maximized as much as possible. I'm just also thinking about some other examples, and I think ultimately the mobility discussion is clearly being a factor to increase better leadership. And I think, in this particular context, better leadership, it means situational. So having a more of a flexible approach to be able to really understand that, okay, if we're trying to put high potential employees into this particular program, is it something for you or not? And if not, that's also totally okay. And to not necessarily have only one option, one path. Why are you not trying to be promoted to this next stage already? Because everybody's different, and everybody needs to be given the right tools and support to get there in their own time. So I think that would also be something that companies could really look at to try to enhance that aspect.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that happened years ago, where everybody wanted to manage people, right? Unless you were managing people, and how many people do you have in your team? You were not at an executive level. It has changed. Some people are managing, extremely large budget and projects, and they don't have any direct reports. So I fully agree with you, Gordon. There's a shift there too. You don't have to go abroad to be successful and to have a purpose and to belong. If that's something that you want, we'll be there. We'll be transparent. We'll tell you how to get there. But it doesn't mean that those who are not leading are lesser contributors. So very, 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 very important as well to have that message in the company to avoid a caste system.
Absolutely.
All right, so there are several questions to both of you. One of them is, so employee who is working at the company, maybe they want to leave their company for a while, not resigning, just to train themselves or gain skills and return their company back. So it could be also, a global mobility. And then to give some insight of this, actually, I saw actual example during my master's. So my classmate actually worked for a strategy consulting company. And then she joined that master's program, not receiving any payment, but she was away for a year to train herself, to study herself and get a master's degree. And then after she finishes her degree, she went back to that company and there was no problem for that. So any ideas on this question? Any things to add on?
So Dorian, you said something super, super important. You have the gift of money and you have the gift of time. And I really, really believe that when we started the session talking about the purpose, a lot of people now also want the gift of time. And so a company telling you, you can go away, you know, we keep your job, or we keep your position. It might change by the time you return, but you will welcome back. We give you the gift of time. Go do something that will feel worthy. And then, you know, if you're happy, we know when you come back, you're going to bring that happiness, you're going to bring that energy to your team and to the company. So it's super, super important. At Locad, we do have a program, and it's not always money. It could be either financial support for whatever you want to do, linked to you have to present your case a little bit. I've not sent yet anybody to become a great chef, but why not? And then you have the gift of time. So, you know, we don't support financially, but you can go away 1 day or 2 days or 1 week, or and that's equally important, I think, both for the mental health as well as developing your own skills. A lot of studies have shown as well, interestingly enough, that employees who are taking their leaves are not penalized. And I think that's also a very, very key message. Being the last in the office is not going to get you anywhere if you're burned out. And that's also a change with those COVID years, where, you know, we do want people to step out. We do want people to reset. We do want people to recharge. I had a long discussion in December when people were approaching me and saying, oh, I still have X number of leave days. I would like to cash these in. It's interesting because those people are also saying, I'm exhausted the week before, right? So you need to explain that our forefathers have been fighting for leave days, and there's a reason why we have those. It's so, you know, you can be with your loved one, you can learn something, you can recharge, you can take care of your health. So I do believe that the gift of time and the gift of money, those two are very, very powerful in the company, whether it's to prepare mobility or whether it's to do something else that really matters to you as a person.
This question reminds me of my first company that had, at that time, it's now about 15 years ago, a very strict policy that if you leave the company, you cannot ever return. And I just remember thinking that there will be so many people, so many great talents who, for all kinds of reasons, would leave, and maybe a year later, maybe 2 years later, maybe even 10 years later, would be a great addition back to the company, having enriched their experiences. And I remember thinking that's really kind of counterintuitive to me. But at the same time, I do think that, you know, this unpaid leave, the option to hold a position for small companies, for startups, can be something a little bit beyond their means, because if you're an incredibly small team, every person matters, then it might be difficult to do such things, and therefore perhaps it's not so much about guaranteeing the job when you come back, but just having a full and frank conversation that you know, at this time you are leaving, and that's totally fine, and you're always welcome back at a later period. And that's maybe just a slightly different way to address that issue. I think also, you know, it directly reminds me of the recent book by the Netflix founder Reed Hastings, No Rules Rules, The Culture of Reinvention, because in there, regarding holidays, they were talking about the guilt that leaders have around taking holidays, and the way in which it is kind of hidden, and that by not really demonstrating that holiday is good and helpful for everybody concerned, then it can be really damaging. And so what the example there was that leaders go back and rather than just, how was your holiday? Great, thanks, moving on, let's get on with business, to actually be much more open and transparent. Share those magic moments that you've had on your holiday, the time that you spent with your kids that you haven't been able to for the previous 6 months because you've been working so much, for example. And I think that can be a great way. I was very surprised when working in Korea for one of Korea's largest companies that the utilization of paid time off was around 50%. And so it meant that with a relatively low number of paid days off, Korea compared to other countries, and yet still only a 50% utilization. That means basically around a week or so of holiday per year. And that was also really surprising to me. It almost leads us into the 4-day working week discussion, which is a very fascinating experiment happening in the UK right now, which I'm going to be very much looking forward to when that starts with, I think, around 100 different companies are being brought into that trial starting in the summertime. I'm going to be keeping my eyes on that as to whether that will be a catalyst for change in that aspect as well.
Yeah, I think there are, I can give you 2 examples at Locad. One thing I'm very, very strict about is don't send that email if you don't have to, because I've seen people saying, oh, I'm going to send it, but you don't have to reply. Too late. You're putting the pressure on the other person. So it's really a discipline of saying, I'm not going to, post that message on Slack. I'm not going to do that update on Notion. It can wait. And the other thing is really having a culture of, I have your back. You need to step away for whatever reason, somebody has your back. And that starts really, really early on. At the beginning, when you have a very small team, it puts a lot of pressure on everyone. And as you grow, you see this culture evolving and becoming better and better. For the learning and development, Gordon, what you said, one way we actually mitigated this at the beginning, again, because you don't necessarily have the budget to send people outside all the time. You actually need your team to be dedicating their full day to the mission and what you're trying to accomplish, is we have been leveraging the skills inside. And so, for instance, we would have the head of sales doing a sales 101. We would have, the person in charge of legal who would be doing compliance 101. So it's really a great way for people to feel great about their skills and for the knowledge to start within. And so this is how we launched the program, really promoting this engagement and saying, you have a way to give back to your team. We have a way to harness some learning before we come up with a big budget and a very comprehensive program for learning. And it goes to what I said for mobility. I think it's so much easier to give when you see that your team members have done the first step. I don't appreciate too much people I've never heard about coming and saying, I need to do that MBA. I'm like, sure, what other classes have you taken on Coursera, on Udemy, on LinkedIn, on what has been your learning journey before? So creativity and generosity before budget. It's not either or, but I do like this approach of saying, tell me what you've done already and why you're stuck, and now we can support you, and not necessarily starting the discussion by saying, here's the check, go run with it. And it's been very, very powerful on the Locad side, and with my kids too. I usually say, like, what have you done by yourself before you come and you ask? And that's a really powerful discussion to have, especially when you're scarce on resources. And also for large companies, right? You want to manage your budget while surveying and having this constant engagement. What have you done up to today if you're coming to me? And now we can support you further.
Thank you, Sophie. I think, unfortunately, we are running out of time. So I think we can talk more about like 4 days work days during our networking session. And it was very nice having you both, Gordon and Sophie, talking about global mobility.